Okay, welcome everyone. Today is the last day of this Intro to Computer Science class. And today we'll just do some review of yesterday's stuff, and then the rest of it will just be all about Hack3. So first we're gonna do some pair decks. So let me stop screen sharing and set that up. Okay, so if you guys can join this pair deck, that would be excellent. Okay, right now there are 3 of you guys here, but 2 of you guys have connected. So I'll just put the code in the chat in case anyone else to join. Okay, first, any questions from yesterday where we talked about databases? Okay, so for your projects, I'm pretty sure they don't have to be like fully coded out and stuff, because if you're presenting for the judges, you'll tell them your idea, but it doesn't have to be like fully all coded out and have everything working. Right, Jonathan? They can be like partially done. Yeah. Okay. What is the difference between using requests in the Twilio client to interact with the API? Okay, so when we did the sending text messages, we imported like a Twilio like custom class, and that had like built-in functions to help us use their API. But like for the Airtable, when we just imported requests, you saw how it was a tiny bit more complex because we had to figure out like if we had to use .post or .delete. So for Airtable, they didn't have like a custom library that we could import. So yeah. Okay, next slide. We have one review question, which is, why are databases more advantageous than using a variable in Python, like a list? So why is it better to store info in a database than just using a variable? So let's see, persistence. Yes, that is right. So the info in databases persist, meaning that even if the program is rerun, the info will stay there, unlike for variables. So for example, if we have a variable in Python that's a list that holds what the user inputs, if we rerun the program, the info will no longer be there. But if we store on Airtable, it will always be there. And I think Jonathan will go over the homework from yesterday.
All right, cool. So yesterday's homework was to, number one, create an Airtable database to create a login system. Store a user's email as the login email and favorite animal as the password. Oh yeah, and so by the way, just a heads up, we're going to spend around like 20 minutes or so on this. So for most of the class that we've had up until now, we've basically gone like by the script. We had something that we want to code and we actually coded this. For this one, we decided not to create like an answer key or anything like that. In fact, I'm going to be coding it like I would a hackathon project to basically show you guys the process of creating a hackathon project. And then we want to store the user's favorite TV show. The users log in to print out their favorite TV show. For people who do not already have an email in the system, let them create a new account. So I've already gone ahead and I've installed the request library because I remembered that we used that yesterday. And now I have to create an Airtable table. So give me a sec. Here is my really basic starting table. So we know that we need to store the user's email. So let's have one column be the email. We need to store the user's favorite animal, which will act as the password. So, and for simplicity, I'm just going to have it be like a single word. And instead of it being all these different drop-down options, I'm just going to have it be, let's see, what is there? Single line text. All right. So imagine that I will have Jonathan at hack3.co. And let's say my favorite animal is a dog. If you remember, Eric likes parakeets. So Eric at hack3.co and parakeet. Yes. Okay. We also want to store the user's favorite TV show, which let's call it single line text as well. Okay, so my favorite TV show is Silicon Valley. It streams on HBO. I highly recommend everyone else here to watch it as well. So on HBO. Eric, what do you like?
I like Friends.
Okay, so Friends, where you watch that?
Uh,
HBO?
I don't know. I know they removed it from Netflix, but I think it's on HBO now. So yeah, also on HBO.
Cool. So we have Airtable, and now we have to get coding. So I remember that yesterday we used the Airtable API. And if you remember, an API is just a way for us to integrate with their system. So I'm just going to search up Airtable API. And we can see here, here is some documentation for that. We see that the ID for the base is something. And we just need some way to like retrieve a certain record. And these are commands like you can run in the command line, but it's not Python. So we have to write our own code to interact with that. So Airtable API Python. Okay, so we see that we need the request library, which is what we used yesterday. So basically, I'm just going through copying some random stuff. So the URL is going to be something like that. And then I need to use this request.get function. So request.get just sounds like a GET request to a certain URL, with the URL being in this kind of format. I'm going to close the console for now. So we'll have that base ID here, the table name, and that's basically the format of the URL. And then we also need this headers thing. So I'm going to see if I can find any information on that. So we need this API key is equal to something and set that to be the headers. Oh, seems like the quotation marks are a bit weird. Cool. And it says undefined name params. And this seems like really complex stuff. Let's just try what we have right now. So we just want to get something from a URL with some certain headers. So I can see over here, this should have a URL somewhere. So the ID of the base is that. And see that from the code that I found online, it expects something like that. The table name, not too sure what that is. Do you think it's login system? So yeah, let's just try login space system. And that's all. Now I just need my API key. I can just copy that. So I'm saying that the response is equal to this request. And let's see, Python response, or actually request.get. So we know that there's a status underscore code params. It seems that you can use this like .json output, or you can use this .text. So if we're just going to print out some text, let's just do print response.text. Let's run that, and we can get a list of all of our records. So we want to be able to store a user's email and favorite animal. So we want to be able to, okay, so actually for this store thing, let's just assume that I've already done it. Let users be able to log in to print out their favorite TV show. So in this case, I know yesterday we used like a while true loop. While true. So this is basically infinity loop, and we want to be able to do something. So let users log in to, so let's say email is equal to input is your email. If we run that, and it basically doesn't do anything because it just keeps on looping back through. So we have the email and the password, and now we want to actually like basically log in. So already we know that we can basically log in through using that. And I remember that there was like this .json thing that I saw from one of these links. I want to see what that actually looks like. So I'm going to comment out this code. It seems like instead of having it as a string, we can have it as like a big dictionary object. So let's do records, because that's like the first item that we see. And now we can see it's basically like one giant object. Here's like first item, and here's second item. So we can get the records, and then once we get the records, we want to basically look at whichever one has the email address that we're looking for. Now, how do we get one of the items in here? So it's basically the next one is a list, so we can have index of 0 or 1 to get the different list items. And once we look into here, we have the fields. And then we have the email. So here's how we get the email address. So in order to start off, let's start off a bit simpler. So we have email is equal to jonathan@hack3.co. Password is equal to dog. So now we're basically going through the Airtable, and we have this item. And let's see. So this one is eric@hack3.co. So that means that mine is the second index, or at index number 1. So in order for us to check in an if statement, we have to use a conditional, which we can use the double equal sign. If it is equal to email, that should output true. So we basically just want a loop to loop through all of these items. So let's say for, let's call it row in, let's call it rows. These are just the different rows of items. Let's set the rows is equal to basically this response, and let's take out up to this records. For row in rows, let's print row. It should output 2 of these items. So we're getting like this JSON format, which just basically is a more organized format. And then we have a list of different records, and we're basically looping through the different records. And we can get the row at fields. So just like we were doing before, we can get the fields and then the email. So you should see one is Eric, one is my name. So we can do an if the email is equal to the email that I'm setting up here, say email. We want to check if the password is the same. Then if, actually, I don't need these parentheses. If the row at fields at favorite, so I'm looking over here for that name of that field, favorite animal is equal to the password that I set, and print correct. And then I'm going to do an else, incorrect. So let's take a look at if this actually works. So it says correct because it says it compares my name of dog to that. Let's see, if I say cat, it should say incorrect. So when it arrives on the email that is eric@hack3.co, it basically just skips over that. And it looks at mine, it compares favorite animal, and then if it is correct, then actually prints it out. So let's see. We want users to be able to log in to print out their favorite TV show. So now that I'm basically checking the username and the password, or in this case, the favorite animal, I actually want to be able to print out the favorite TV show. So now I'm going to I'm going to do print row at favorite TV show. TV show. So let's take a look if that's correct. Let's make the statement a bit nicer. So sorry, your password was sadly incorrect. Run the program again to try again. Something like that. So let's try dog. And we can see it is printing out Silicon Valley on HBO. I know we have create a new account, but just for the sake of time, we're going to skip over that for today. So you can basically see how my process worked. I basically used Google to kind of like search through some code examples, and it doesn't really matter what sites you go on. You just have to get some code examples and see if you can actually run it. Once you have something that's working, then you can modify it and add in all this other code. So in this case, I like kind of modified this other part to actually create like a login system. So it's like you can basically copy and paste different code snippets off of the internet, add them all together, and then you have a complete program. In this case, we are implementing the Airtable API. And as you can see, you basically did it in 25 minutes or so. Over the hackathon, you have a total of 24 hours, and make sure you get enough sleep. But other than that, you have quite a bit of time to like fiddle around, play around with different things to actually see if you can create a full project. So let's kind of like review what some different concepts are. So first, we know that importing a module is basically just importing some code that is already predefined. So the request library lets us send out requests without interacting with like the underlying protocols, without playing around with the actual bits that the computer interacts with. We're setting a variable. For example, email is equal to something. These quotes indicate that this is a string. And we're setting a second variable. We're setting more variables here. And in this case, we're actually using something called concatenation, as I mentioned during like class 2 or something. So we have text that can be added to other text. So instead of math, where a plus symbol just means adding two things together, a minus symbol means subtracting things, to multiplication symbols means to the power of, you can add different strings together by just using this plus symbol, and it will create a much larger string. Here, again, we're using that. And we also briefly mentioned the fact that dictionaries exist, which is just like an ordered set of information. So here is a dictionary that I copied off of the internet that says that this authorization key is linked to this whatever bearer plus that token. So it's like, imagine that in a dictionary, there's like a word and there's like a definition. So it's saying like the word authorization is linked to the definition of bearer plus whatever my API key is. Here I'm actually using the request library. As you saw, when I was going through, I basically played around with the JSON and created this list, basically. I looked through the JSON, kind of just trying to play around and see how things are. And I realized that this records thing is a list. Now with lists, you can loop through by using a for each loop where you define a variable. In this case, I'm saying row, and I'm calling that for each item in rows. So with each item within rows, I can print out or I can check its element or its email, and then do other actions based on that. So yeah, and in here, we are using a for loop, and we're using if statements and else statements. So yeah, I hope you guys were able to do something like that for homework last night, just going through the internet. There is no answer to like everything. So that's why you have to just use the internet and piece different things together like I did here. You want to be able to do that with everything that you're doing. So yeah. Any questions or anything? So I see that Abia has joined us, and so has Srini. So do you guys want to talk about, actually, can you guys give me like 5 more minutes? I will do a brief.
Yeah, sure, Jonathan.
Okay. So tomorrow, you won't just have access to the internet, you'll have access to mentorship, to mentors. So if you need help with a project that you cannot find answers online for, you can post a request in the #mentorships Slack channel. If you guys have seen like the team formation channel, mentorships is just like that. There's like a format that you should go through, and a mentor that is online can message you. Generally, you guys will use like video chat or messaging to actually communicate. And ultimately, it depends on the mentor's availability and expertise. Keep in mind that they're all volunteers, so don't expect too much out of them. Really respect their time and try to do Google if you can. So in this case, you can see there's someone from a previous year who specifies their urgency, whatever. And we have a mentor that replied with a link to a Stack Overflow response. And basically, you can do this as well. So if you're running into trouble, you can get help. With the actual schedule, I've highlighted some of the different events that you guys might be interested in. So if you're a beginner, come meet other beginners from 1:15 to 1:30, around 15 minutes after the opening ceremony ends. There will be a Zoom for you guys to hop in to introduce yourselves and see if you can make any new friends. From 3 to 4 p.m., there's an introduction to cloud with an Amazon employee. So Suresh ran this workshop last year as well. I attended it. It was amazing. You guys should all go. From 5 to 6, you can learn how to build a website with Raphael. So we've learned a lot of different Python tricks. Now you can see if you can create like a website to add on to this Python backend knowledge that you already have. So imagine that you can create like this application with both a front end and a back end. That will be really interesting. From 7 to 8, there's a mini event with Major League Hacking, where you can watch someone paint like in Microsoft Word. Highly recommended as well. I think I will probably show up. And from 8 p.m. onwards, we should have like a hacker hangout where you can just hang out with other participants on a Zoom and play some games. On Sunday, from 9 to 10, there's another machine learning workshop with Amazon's Randy Moy. Highly recommended as well. I went to this workshop last year. You guys should definitely show up. And from 10 to 10:45, you'll learn about how to present your project to judges and what you should include in your slide deck with our own Amanda Sherman, who is an organizer who has been with us for, I think, this is her 3rd year. So she will give you tips on the actual presentation. Remember to take advantage of the team formation Slack channels. So message other people, meet new friends, especially if you're a beginner. Go onto that Zoom that I mentioned. Go to like the introductory workshops. Don't go to all of the workshops if you're also looking to create a project. But if you decide not to create a project, feel free to show up for all of the workshops. You want to make sure that you have enough time to work on your project while you, at the same time, you still have enough time to learn new things. Take advantage of mentors and utilize these free credits. So we went through the Twilio API, but there's also Echo 3D for AR and VR projects, and TensorDoc, you can get $25 in free cloud credits. So regarding the actual Hack3 judges, here's our list. You can find it online on our website or our dev post. You can see a wide variety of different backgrounds. You have people working at startups, for example, startup founders, and you have people working at medium-sized companies, like for example, Redfin, FutureWay, which is the US arm of the Chinese company Huawei. So Huawei in China is the largest tech company, and this is their US branch. So we have managers, engineers from a wide variety of different backgrounds. We've created 4 judging groups to basically have like a diverse set of different minds. And we also have, never mind. So judges will be going along this rubric. Number one, technology and functionality. They'll be checking like, does the project actually work? Ideally, you can do something more than just create like a drawing on Figma or something like that. So for a login system, having something like we created over here, where it just basically asks for your email and password, that's more than enough, especially if you're a beginner. You just want something that that judges can interact with and isn't just like a drawing. Does the project include creative code concepts, or does it just directly like copy an API? Like if your project was translate any word, and basically you just enter in the word, you use the Google Translate API, and then you just spit that out, that's not enough. You want to be able to utilize more than that. So how can you put your own twist while incorporating other APIs? So how technically impressive was the project? This one you don't have to worry about too much, especially if you're beginners. Judges will understand. And for creativity, you want to make sure that your project is creative, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Civic need. Is it something that people might actually want? And then the cool factor, which is how geeky is the project? Is it like something that's really cool? For example, one of the hackathon projects that I saw was that there's like this computer where when it ran into an error, it would basically explode. Now, that might not solve any like larger problem, but that's really, really cool. And that's something that we want to reward. We want to be like a gathering of computer interested students. We don't want like this competition where people are trying to like game the system by doing something that's just specifically civic need, trying to solve like a huge problem or something. It's absolutely fine if you're just creating a really cool project. And teamwork and project presentation, you'll learn more about this at the 10 a.m. workshop on Sunday with Amanda. But you want to be able to convey the information about your project. So judges are not looking for the project that has the most complicated algorithms or something. They're looking for a project that solves an issue in the most creative way. So you can create anything that relates to programming, just simple code projects like we've been doing this week, mobile applications, if you know how to create those, websites, etc. So it's really just whatever you want. Yeah. So with workshops, as I mentioned, I already covered those. All right, so Srini and Abhi are organizers who created a project one year. Do you guys want to talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. So Srinivas, and two other kids were part of the team. The first year Hack3 was running their hackathon. And I think both me and Srini remember our project, which was a mass detector. So pretty much what we had done was that you would walk in front of the camera, and then using an AI algorithm, it would detect if you are wearing a mask or not. And then it would then open a door, which would it would allow entry if you are wearing a mask, and if you're not wearing a mask, it would reject it. So yeah, as you can see here, since it detects they're wearing a mask, it opens the door and it lets you go through. And yeah, as you can see, the hack was since it was done in 24 hours, it was not out of the world. You can see like all the boxes and stuff still outside. We used motors and different pulleys and like a rope to do it. Like you can see the camera is like taped. It was a Raspberry Pi camera. So the production level wasn't the best, but it did the job. And Shruti, you want to talk about how we came up with the idea?
Yeah, so like at the time, we were just like experimenting with machine learning and AI, and at the time this was Hack3 2020, so COVID had just hit, and there was not really like many like technological solutions to COVID at that time. So we thought that like since wearing a mask is very important and helps slow down the disease, we thought that we could use our knowledge of AI to sort of make a project that could help businesses reopen during the COVID time and while still keeping people safe. So we sort of thought of like how our local community has been like impacted by COVID and how businesses need to reopen, but not at the cost of human lives. So we decided to use our ideas through deep learning to make it. And as Abhi said, we just made like a proof of concept. This obviously hackathons are not meant for building like full-fledged projects where you have like intricate hardware designs and stuff like that. We just taped stuff together and just stuck a bunch of cardboard boxes and stuff. But it did the job, and that's honestly what matters. As long as you can convey to the judges in some way of like what your project is about and provide a decent enough demo to show that you actually did something during the hackathon, uh, that's really all that matters. So just have fun when you're hacking and try to make something cool.
How much time did you spend coming up with this idea? Or how did you already have the idea?
So to be honest, we were sort of just like after during the hackathon, we were sort of just like brainstorming ideas. I think one of the tracks was related to COVID-19 that year. So we were just like thinking, and we sort of started off like big and like thinking like, oh, we can like, I remember we tried to use like regression to sort of predict the COVID trends and like try to like model how like we could like predict and stuff like that. But that ended up becoming like way too complex and intricate. So we were just like, let's scratch that idea and let's try to do something more local and something that we can just like easily implement. And so we sort of just went to my basement and just like found a bunch of parts that I had lying around. And we were like, okay, we have a motor here and we have like some rope and stuff like that. So we just like, so we were sort of just like playing around with stuff and we just started to just like realize that like, oh, if we can't predict how COVID will be like tomorrow, we can at least try to prevent how we can limit the spread of COVID today. So just stuff like that. And I'll be anything.
Yeah,
During
I
the
think
actual, yeah.
one of
Abhi,
the other parts of it also was the fact like we looked at each of our strengths on our team that we had. So like me and Srinivas working previously together on different projects, it ended up helping us out overall. Was we both knew that Srini was good at we were good at making computer vision projects, and so once we realized that the COVID trend did not work, we shifted to that our strengths and played our strengths accordingly, and that's another way I guess you could think about coming up with this project.
sure. So during the actual event, so it seems like you guys spent a bit of time brainstorming, and then did you guys start coding? How many hours did you sleep? How many hours? Like I see you have an entire presentation and demo here. How much time do you spend on this?
In actuality, I think we only slept like 2 to 3 hours that day. We didn't really sleep at all. So as Abhi said, we played on our strengths. We had 3 members of our group, so we delegated tasks and stuff. So we had our 3rd member, Milan, sort of work on the presentation side and create a pitch. And Abhi would work on the hardware. And since I was well versed with deep learning, I just took over that aspect. So we worked individually for a while, and then after we had finished like the majority of our work, we started to piece things together. We filmed the live demonstration through that video, which was a part of that video, and then we also attached this presentation where we created a slideshow presentation and we just went through everything, tried to pitch our thing as effectively as possible. As you can see, we only have a 5-minute long presentation and we still ended up winning 3rd place. So one thing is that like keep your pitches short but like concise and like try to get the point across without talking for a long time. If you want to add anything?
I think remember like Trinity. Remember we tested this. We came from Trinity's house to I think my house, or I think we were still in his house. But at the night we were testing our code, and it actually ended up working. Like we taped it to our beds as the door, and then we were just checking if it would work, and then it ended up working in the night. But daytime comes along the next day, and submission is at I think 12 or 1, and we set up to do the recording part of it because that was all that was left. And then we realized that it actually was not able.
Is he cutting out for you guys too?
Yeah, I think so. I think he cut out there, but I think what he meant to say was just like it didn't work, so we had to go back and like try to fix it again. And what ended up happening was like
Yeah,
we had to like do this like fix where we had to like sort of dim the brightness of the camera a lot so that it actually could detect it because camera quality wasn't that good. So like the face was literally just like very bright. So we had to dim the light a bit using Python software. But yeah, we thought that we had a working solution when we went to sleep that night, but then when we woke up to record, it just didn't work. And we were a bit we were panicking a bit, but we ended up getting the job done. So that's what ended up that's what matters. So
Cool. All right. Any questions from our participants who are joining live? Okay. If you're watching this recording later on, feel free to email or just message Srini and Abhi in the Slack, and they can tell you more about their experiences. Cool. That's it. Thank you guys so much for coming. See you guys tomorrow at the opening ceremony, which is at 12 p.m. Eastern time.
all right, sounds good. Thank you all. Have fun at the workshop.
All right. Okay. So some people left. We still have a little bit more in our slideshow. So for our 3 remaining people, let's go through. So for the Hack3 themes, we will have one that is specific, for example, healthcare prevention. It will not be healthcare prevention. One that's broader, for example, like history. So you have to create like a historical thing, or I don't know. And one that is just like a 1-word base track. So for example, the word visibility. So let's go through like a mock brainstorming session. So we basically want to break down these other barriers. So we will be running a workshop with Amanda on the day of for presentations. And in this case, we want to also, so we've learned about coding. You guys will learn about presentations. And so now let's learn about ideation. So for example, for these 3 things, let's just work through it together. And Eric, can I bounce ideas off of you?
Yeah.
Sure. So let's say that we are doing, can I type? Seems like I cannot type. Oh, because the text is white. Let's create a new doc. And I'll paste. Okay. So for example, if the word is the word, or if the track is the word visibility,
Well, for me, the first thing that comes to mind is, I don't know, something that has to do with seeing stuff. So like eyesight or something.
okay, so the literal definition of the word visibility is like sight. So in a more figurative sense, how about like visibility of information?
Yeah.
So what do you think are different things that can be more visible?
Maybe like health information.
Okay, so health visibility. So what are you thinking for that? You know, when you said the word like health visibility, I was thinking like maybe we could track people's like health over time. So if you're trying to lose weight, then there can be something that like tracks your progress day by day. And then maybe you can create like a graph or something. So like a health tracker app.
Yeah.
People can see their progress, visualize. You know, when you said health visibility, I also thought of like, so this is personal health. Let's say that there's like societal So you can like COVID-19 case modeling. So like some graphs or something. You can pull data off of like a government APIs. So pull data off of an API somewhere that has all this data, then visualize it somehow. So to visualize it, you can probably use like some Python library for graphs. You can probably find something out there. For personal health, you could probably also do like a Python library for graphs, something like that. Okay. What
Yeah.
else are you thinking?
Well, when I think of like visibility of information, it's like journalism because they're like trying to expose like truths and whatever. So something about journalism. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't, should we create like a new version of Twitter? I think that's a little bit harder.
Yeah, that's
But when you said like journalistic integrity, it made me think of the fact that a bunch of like tech companies are collecting people's data, right?
yeah.
So data collection. Like, so if you search up like Facebook data download, you can download a copy of your information of like Facebook and stuff, and like all the data that they're tracking about you. So maybe like pull data off of some like export and show what that export has. So if you think about like all these tech companies for all these like data downloads, it's probably like a lot of junk that's like meant to like obfuscate like you from actually seeing what they're actually collecting. So a bunch of like weird formatting or something, just to make it more clearer and show like what Facebook thinks of you when they're tracking you. You could probably create an app that goes through like, or just a Python script that goes through and scans like the data download and actually processes that data download and takes a look at the actual information. We'll probably use some Python library for, I don't know, if you're doing a data download, maybe it's like .txt files, like
Yeah.
.txt files, just to scan, just to extract the information. Show what Facebook knows about you. I don't know, something like that. And also let's say like the ability about local town establishments. It's like app to help you track those. So for example, if we were to actually create, let's say we were to actually create like this first one, we could probably create something in Python. We could use Python library for graphs. We can have a class, remember classes, to store progress at each day, or a class to store a user, so you can have multiple users. And you can have a list of instances of a class. So imagine that you can have basically a checkpoint at each day. So you can have a list of these instances of each day, basically tracking your progress. You can have a health tracker app. I don't know, I think this is enough to work with. So these are 4 ideas that came out of one word, the word visibility. So tomorrow, once we reveal our tracks for this year, you will probably just go through some similar thing, come up with some ideas. All 4 of these, I think, are pretty valid projects to create. And yeah, so this is basically our thinking process on how to create a project. Okay. So you could do this for any of these other ones. So again, we'll have one that's very specific, for example, healthcare prevention. One that's broader, like a general category that you can create a project in, and one that's like very much open to interpretation, like this one. So notice how we start off with just one word, visibility. We could interpret it in a variety of different ways to create some really meaningful projects. Actually, this local town establishments, this reminds me of one project from 2020, I believe. Homegrown 2020. So this project is basically like this UI for you to track different local establishments. And so we've already learned all of like the Python backend that you would need to learn. They just added like this front UI onto it. So you guys can create pretty meaningful projects now. You guys have the tools and the mentors on the day of, and Google, and yeah, keep in mind that on the judging rubric, hack3.co/rubric. If you look at the actual technology and functionality, one of the points is just simply, does a project work? Does it do anything? And if your project does do something, if you have like the backend written out in Python, it basically does pretty well. And keep in mind that this technical, like impressive part is just one small part of this larger section of technology and functionality. So 4/5 of your grade is determined by other stuff. So how you present, how well your team works basically in your presentation. If your project is cool, is it just something that's like really, really simple? Something that's obviously just trying to game the system? Or is it something that is like legitimately like really interesting, that really impresses judges in some way? It doesn't have to impress them in a technical sense. So 4/5 of your grade comes from things that aren't the actual technology. And a big section of this technology section is just, does it work? Or is it just like a mock-up that's created in Microsoft Paint? So even as beginners, you guys have a very high chance of doing really well, doing better than you might expect, and actually winning some prizes. So yeah, we've gone through how to come up with ideas, how to actually code some stuff, because we'll have workshops on the day of to learn more about coding, integrate like the web interface, mentors to help you, and a presentation workshop. So yeah, Eric, is there anything else that we should cover?
I think that's it.
All right. So that was our mock idea brainstorming session. Let's go through the takeaways. So again, we're just drilling this again and again, but judges focus on how creative your solution is. So keep in mind, we started off with the word visibility, and we work to have like all these projects that solve some problems. We want you guys to create projects that solve some problems or that are really, really cool. Don't create something that is simple and is not cool, basically. You can create anything, websites, just code projects, Python, applications, etc. And you can take advantages of mentors, workshops, and Slack. So thank you guys so much for coming. Happy hacking. See you guys at 12 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. Have a great night's sleep tonight. I do not recommend sleeping only 2 or 3 hours tomorrow night. But make sure that you guys check out the team formation channel, meet some new friends. For example, in Srini and Avi's group, as I mentioned, there was someone who worked on the presentation the entire time. There's someone who worked on the software and someone who worked on the hardware. With a team, you can basically divvy up work and befriend new people. So again, if you guys are actually paying attention, send me a message in Slack. We've decided to send out $10 gift cards to like the most active workshop participants. So send me a message and you might receive one.
Thanks everyone for joining.
All right, goodbye.